We've been having this discussion about what will be necessary to prevent the incoming Trump administration from doing bad things. And we've had a conversation about what some of those things may be. That's not what I want to talk about today. Here, I want to talk about what the strategies will have to be from independent media. And it's increasingly clear that corporate media is not going to be actively criticizing or even issuing a sort of serious critique of what Donald Trump plans to say, including lies. And what I mean by that is, we'll start with one example. On NBC's Meet the Press over the weekend, Wall Street Journal editor-in-chief Gerard Baker was asked about, will you call out Donald Trump's lies? When Trump lies, and we know Trump lies like many politicians have never been able to do so before, to quote George W. Bush. We don't always see the lies called what they are. Here's what Gerard Baker said, and I warn you, it's very, very disturbing.
Do you feel comfortable saying so-and-so lied? To be that, if somebody says just an outright falsehood, do you say the word lie? Is that important to start putting in reporting or not?
You know, it's a good, I'd be careful about using the word lie. Lie implies much more than just saying something that's false. It implies a deliberate intent to mislead. I think it's perfectly, when Donald Trump says thousands of people were on the rooftops of New Jersey on 9/11 celebrating, thousands of Muslims were there celebrating, I think it's right to investigate that claim, to report what we found, which is that nobody found any evidence of that whatsoever, and to say that. I think it's then up to the reader to make up their own mind, to say, this is what Donald Trump says, this is what a reliable, trustworthy news organization reports, and you know what? I don't think that's true. I think if you start ascribing a moral intent, as it were, to someone by saying that they've lied, I think you run the risk that you look like you're not being objective. And I think, and I do think also it applies, look, people, this is happening all the time now. Right. People are looking at what Donald Trump's saying and say this is false, it's a false claim. And I think people say, well, you know what, Hillary Clinton said a lot of things that were false. I don't recall the press being quite so concerned about saying that she lied.
So what Hillary Clinton has to do with this, I have no idea. We're now nearly 2 months past the election of Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton is nowhere to be found. No clue what she has to do with any of this. So Gerard Baker's making this into more of a semantic and definition thing, right? The word lie includes an intent. You know it's not true and you say it anyway, presumably to mislead or deceive, versus you misstated a fact which could come from ignorance. You can't know the intent, so you can't call them lies, but will report inaccuracies. Not bad, right? Well, no, not really. What Gerard Baker is suggesting is pussyfooting around. We have not found evidence that what Donald Trump alleges is true. Donald Trump's lies are at such a level that this is not going to cut it. And other media outlets have not hesitated to call them lies. The New York Times, MSNBC, New York Magazine, the Washington Post. Oh, well, they don't matter because they're just liberal. Serious media like the Wall Street Journal, which is, by the way, owned by News Corporation, which is the company that owns Fox News as well. They are going to be better because we don't know what Donald Trump's intent is. When Donald Trump claims that the unemployment rate is really 42%, when it's 5%, we're going to say, we've not been able to find evidence that the unemployment rate is 42%, and let the public decide. When Donald Trump claimed with no evidence that he could save $300 billion a year from the Medicare prescription drug program that only costs $78 billion, should news outlets say, we've not found evidence based on just knowing that 78 is a smaller number than 300, that this is actually possible, but viewers and readers should judge for themselves. And of course, Gerard Baker mentioning the entire people, thousands dancing on the rooftops of September 11. We have to refresh the difference between politician lies versus lying lies. I defend and am completely okay with when you hear a politician lie. So what's a politician lie? A politician lie would be, for example, we've seen significant increases to the deficit in the area of XYZ under President Obama. Well, okay, you know, that's not a lie. That's a politician lie, where when you look into it, you might be able to construct a scenario by excluding counter information where during specific dates your claim might be true, even though it's totally out of context and not really representative of what's going on. When you say the unemployment rate is 42% when it's actually 5%, that is not a politician lie. That is a lying lie, and you need to be able to call that out. Now, there's another possibility, which is if you do not say with certitude that Donald Trump is lying, there's only one other possible belief, which is that Donald Trump is utterly ignorant about issues he should know something about as president of the United States. So if you refuse to call them lies, then you need to explain that Trump is a dangerously clueless buffoon. And there's obviously no way that the Wall Street Journal is going to do that. And Dan Rather is having absolutely none of this. He posted to his Facebook page the other day, quote, "A lie is a lie is a lie. Journalism, as it was taught, as I was taught, is a process of getting as close to some valid version of the truth as is humanly possible. And one of my definitions of news is information that the powerful don't want you to know." So this statement from the editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal about how his paper will report on Donald Trump's potential future lies is disturbing, deeply disturbing. It is not the proper role of journalists to meet lies, especially from someone of Trump's stature and power, by hiding behind semantics and euphemisms. Our role is to call it as we see it, based on solid reporting. When something is, in fact, a demonstrable lie, it is our responsibility to say so. There is Dan Rather, Pat, pointing out what I pointed out, that this is a semantic game and that it's not going to cut it.
I think that's a really high expectation in terms of the burden of proof to call someone out for a lie, that you have to knowingly have some idea that they had intent behind what they were saying. But if you look at some of the examples that Donald Trump has said in the past few months on the campaign trail, there are clear evidences of that. I mean, he said that he lost personal friends on 9/11, hundreds of them. When you ask, can you name just one of them? He can't do it. That's a clear example of a lie.
Yeah, and there's some areas where, I said that the alternative to these being lies are that he really just doesn't know, and that should also be reported. But with Pat's example, for example, are we arguing that Donald Trump deliberately lied about losing hundreds of friends on 9/11? Or are we saying he actually exists in the world thinking he lost hundreds of friends on 9/11 when it's not true? That's actually just as concerning if he is personally that clueless about what the reality of the situation is. Also, last thought on this. There are these things called editorials in the Wall Street Journal. Is the argument that the Wall Street Journal won't call Donald Trump out for lies in supposed reporting pieces? Or are they also saying when we do editorials about the president, which obviously that's something the Wall Street Journal does as the second biggest newspaper in the United States, they're also going to hide behind these semantic differences and euphemisms there as well? What's abundantly clear is we can't count on corporate media. That's why we're raising money at davidpakman.com/donate to increase and engage progressives in actions that will actually make a difference. And this is why increasingly you are right to be skeptical of corporate media. Thanks for watching this video. Before you watch the next one, remember, we're raising money to expand the David Pakman Show big league, as well as expand progressive activism. Go to davidpakman.com/donate. Donations of any size are much appreciated.